Welcome everyone to another Motivation Monday video. My name is Arianna White-Levatich and I'm a third year graduate student in educational psychology at Old Dominion University. And I'm here with the amazing Carlton Fong. He's an assistant professor at Texas State University in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. Welcome, Carlton.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into it. My first question is, how does your research in the field of motivation influence the way that you teach in the classroom?
Okay, great. Well, I've thought of three motivational topics that I've studied that I try to implement in my teaching. And those three are belonging and creating a classroom community, implementing autonomy supportive strategies, and using motivationally supportive feedback. And so I really want my classroom not just to be, a venue for instruction. I really want students to come and feel like they belong. They're welcomed by me, the instructor, and by their peers. And so one thing that I do in my teaching is I do a classroom contract and on the very first week of class, where I open the discussion and say, what kind of classroom community do you want? And what are the things you want to see? What are some of the guiding principles that you would like to have as we think about creating this community together? And I think I try it every semester, and it always works where students open up and they share and they really want to bond together. They really want to set expectations and roles for each other that really help forge them together as a community. And so I think that's definitely one big way I try to incorporate my motivational research and belonging to the classroom. I think a big second way is to help increase student autonomy when possible. And so I like to give a lot of meaningful choices and provide rationales for those choices as well. And so for my graduate courses, I give a lot of flexibility with which readings they can choose. And so I usually give them a list of 4 or 5 articles, and then they can choose, 2 to 3 of those articles that really speak to them. And I'll describe each of the articles, what they represent, what their main findings are. And so they have some rationale for why they may want to choose them, and then they ultimately can make that choice. I also give them a lot of choice in the types of activities they want to do during class, how to maybe structure the discussion, and also on assessments, giving them a lot of choices on the type of exam questions. And I give them a set of questions that they can choose from as well. And I find that to be really effective in having students more engaged and they feel like they're taking initiative of their learning. And the third way is feedback. Feedback is often really scary for students. I think they really dread kind of receiving grades and any comments on their writing and things like that. And so I really want to give motivationally supportive feedback. And I do that with thinking about 2 dimensions. The first one's being constructive and being specific. And so I really try to isolate areas in which they can improve and really try to highlight those directions for them. And then the second aspect is being emotionally sensitive to the learner's needs. And so maybe thinking about their level of self-efficacy, their motivation, their skill sets, and thinking, okay, how can I phrase the feedback? How can I leverage face work or politeness or hedging to maybe be sensitive to how they may receive that feedback? So I think those 3 topics are things that I've studied and ways that I try to incorporate it.
That's amazing. Very complete answer. I had so many questions, mostly about that motivational supportive feedback, because that sounds really, really cool and in the classroom. I don't think I've had any professors that do that. My second question is, what types of activities have you used in the classroom that you haven't mentioned already or would like to expand on more in order to teach motivation topics specifically?
Yeah. So I first want to credit a lot of my colleagues. There's a group of us emerging early career scholars that have gotten together and we share a lot of the activities that we've come up with. So I definitely want to acknowledge them and the amazing help that they've been. I think one activity that I often do is a classroom debate. And so I think there's a lot of theories and motivation that could go either way with what's kind of the best theory, or what are the best constructs, or what should instruction focus on. And so there's a lot of questions in our field, and I think that's like the perfect opportunity for debates. And so, for instance, one year we did a debate on the role of extrinsic motivation. Like, does that have a role in learning? Should this be something that we're focused on? Similarly, with performance approach goals, there's a lot of kind of debate still with that. And so I divide the class into two, and then they're able to use the articles as evidence. So then they can point to specific quotes or specific page numbers and say, well, look here, so and so says this, like this is my opening argument. And then we structure it, and they really get into it. And I think they really start to understand the nuances of that theory as well. A second activity is motivation in real life, or TV life. And so I'll often have students find clips, just off YouTube of, their favorite TV shows or movies. And for that week, they have to analyze some motivational construct or some motivational process that they see in that scene with the characters. And it always makes for a really lively, fun discussion. But I think they're also able to apply a really, complicated theory into some, real life scenario, and they're able to talk about those implications as well. And then a third activity is thinking about the measures that we use in motivation. Often it's a lot of these scales that scholars have designed. And so actually bringing in those measures and actually thinking about how are we thinking about goal orientation or intrinsic motivation, and how are we measuring it. And I have them kind of do a content analysis on the items to see, is this really capturing your understanding of the construct? Is something missing? How can we improve this measure? And so just trying to make it really hands-on, giving them something concrete to work with.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, measurement is so central to what we do. So it's
Yeah.
great to really bring that into the classroom early. Um, my last question is, what are some common challenges that we may face when we teach motivation courses? And along with those challenges, what are some resources or tools that you found that can help with overcoming?
So once again, I have three great answers to your three questions. So I would say the three challenges that I've seen and I've experienced in motivation courses are discussing and understanding some of the overlap in motivational theories. Second issue is properly thinking about the role of race, culture, and equity in motivation. And then also thinking about the methods in motivation as well, used to study motivation. And so the first challenge, and I think a lot of students really express this, is while a lot of these theories begin to sound similar to each other, and they begin to maybe confuse some of the constructs that do have some overlap. And so I think one tool or one resource is to begin kind of documenting these types of overlaps. And so we'll, create some sort of Google Doc where they can, make a chart and start seeing, okay, how are these constructs similar? And then towards the end of the semester, we look at that kind of Google Doc where we're all compiling different similarities, different constructs that seem like there is some overlap. And then we try to work on like a grand theory of motivation. And that really gets people to really synthesize across these theories and see, wow, how can we understand some of the bigger themes across all of these theories? The second challenge is often addressing the role of race, culture, and equity. And I've looked at a lot of syllabi. I've revamped my course in light of this challenge as well. And in the past, I've often seen a lot of syllabi kind of just have 1 week just devoted to like the role of race and culture and equity. Um, but I found that one resource is actually to forefront race, culture, and equity from the beginning of the course, and actually make that a thread kind of throughout the whole entire course rather than just an isolated week. And so what I often do is I'll have the course read De Queer Gunby and Schutz, the educational psychologist piece, actually for the first week of the semester. So they're already grounded in thinking about the role of race in motivation in ed psych. And then I design my readings to incorporate at least one piece focused on race and culture that are aligned with that week's content, that week's theory. And so we're constantly thinking about, well, how does this theory apply across cultures or with a specific race focused lens? And so I think the students really appreciate that because I think it naturally comes up. If we're not intentionally planning it within the course, students are asking, well, what about other cultures, right? What about other races? What about contexts? And um, instead of having those discussions be relegated just to 1 week, let's have it every week. Let's think about the constructs and these theories with those lenses throughout the whole semester. And then a third challenge is sometimes students come into a motivation course and I want to give them a lot of the current research on the topic, but they may not have a lot of the quantitative expertise to understand complex path analyses and longitudinal studies. So they get kind of bogged down with all the stats. And so what I'll often do is I'm really careful in selecting readings that maybe have one quantitative empirical method, but making sure I also have one qual piece as well. Because I feel like the qual pieces, students are able to relate to that more. I think they're able to kind of recognize student voices and teacher voices and how they're talking about these constructs more so than difficult equations and stats. And so giving them one piece that helps ground them empirically with a more of a qual approach, and then we talk about the quantitative approach when they're a little bit more familiar with those constructs. So different tools and resources that I've used that I have found to be effective to address these challenges.
Yet again, those all sound really great. And I can imagine that when you're talking about, the different motivational theories, you really, are also using those articles to talk about the methods and still putting together that big motivational theory all at once. It sounds really like well constructed and put together nicely. It's like a nice model that you've laid out for us. So thank you.
Of course, thank you
Is
so
there
much.
anything else that you would like to add?
I would say as you're thinking about teaching these topics and teaching a course on motivation, definitely reach out to the SIG. There's a lot of scholars teaching these courses, and I have found people to be so generous with their strategies, their resources, and you can really borrow, a lot of these tools and begin to construct your own course. And like I said, I want to give a shout out to all the help that I received, and I've been able to take things that I've seen that have worked over time and begin to kind of make them my own. So
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Carlton.